Thanks. Okay, it is Monday, June 14th, 2021 at 10 a.m. I call this joint meeting of the Wellfleet Select Board and several other agencies in a roundtable discussion to order. This meeting will be held with the temporary via Zoom video conference with the temporary suspension and enhancement of the open meeting law requirements by Governor Baker. Good morning, everyone, and just like to thank you all for attending this roundtable discussion. And I guess I'd like to begin by going around the room and having everyone introduce themselves that are participants in this. And I'll go down the list on the agenda, and you can just state your name and what agency you're from. Or I guess you don't have to say that because I'm going to say it. So we'll start with the Select Board. Why don't we go? I'll introduce myself first. I'm Michael DeVasto. I'm the chair of the Select Board, and we'll go down the list that we usually vote by. So, Janet, you're muted.
Morning, Janet Reinhardt, Vice Chair of the Select Board.
You're muted, Justina.
Sorry about that. Justina Carlson, Wellfleet Select Board.
Ryan Curley, Wellfleet Select Board.
Helen Miranda Wilson, Wellfleet Select Board.
Okay, and do we have any state legislators on here? Anyone from the legislature or from their office?
Mr. Suarez was supposed to come from Julian's office.
Okay. Well, maybe he'll come on.
Who is 518-424-1507, please?
Don't know. Okay. From the Department of Transportation.
Tom Courier, I work with Greg Mitchell, your PM.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yep.
Greg Mitchell, I'm the project manager from Mass DOT. And as Tom said, I have Tom Courier here, Pam Hasner, who is the district project development engineer, Maddie DeClerc, she is at headquarters in Boston, and Sean Handy, who is with the district. And they can go ahead and introduce themselves.
Okay.
Sure. Pam Hasner. I am the District 5 Project Development Engineer.
John Handy, I'm the District 5 Projects Design Engineer.
And I'm Maddie DeClerc. I'm with Highway Design at headquarters as a complete streets reviewer.
And Tom already introduced himself, so
Okay.
that's all we have with us today.
Great.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Michael.
And Department of Conservation and Recreation. Who do we have from there?
Hi, this is Paul Janegy. I'm Director of our Trails and Greenways program from Department of Conservation and Recreation, and I don't think he's on yet, but Craig Cashman from our Legislative Affairs should be joining as well.
Okay. Thank you, Paul. Cape Cod Commission.
Good morning, Stephen Tupper, Transportation Program Manager at the Cape Cod Commission, and our Executive Director, Christy Senatori, will be joining as well.
Okay, thank you. National Parks and National Park Service.
Good morning. This is Brian Carlstrom, Superintendent, Cape Cod National Seashore, and Michael looks like someone from Sarah Peak's office may have joined us. We'd like
Okay.
And Sarah Peak has joined you also.
Okay. Hi, Sarah.
Hi.
Okay, the Bike and Walkways Committee.
to,
Do you have more?
and Michael,
Brian?
one more.
One more from Park Service. Hi, I'm Lauren McKean, Park Planner.
Hi, Lauren.
Hi there, how are you?
Good. Okay, so now Bike and Walkways Committee.
Yes, Peter Cook, Chair of the Bike and Walkways Committee. And we have one other member of the committee who's going to be joining, Ned Oliver. He's coming online in just a minute.
Okay, thanks, Peter.
Mike DeVasto.
Yep.
This is Bob Weinstein. I'm the MPO representative for Region D, which comprises Eastham, Wellfleet, Truro, and Provincetown. I'm also the chair of the Select Board in Truro.
Okay,
Yeah, and Mike, I want to mention Kaylin Hilliard, my research director, is on this call as well. I have an RTA caucus meeting that I have to jump off in about 45 minutes, but Kaylin will be here taking notes and participating fully in your meeting for the balance of it.
Great.
Thanks.
Thank you, Sarah.
Yep.
Okay, so I'll start out by sort of stating the purpose of the meeting. The purpose of this meeting is to give a status update on the current plans for the DCR rail trail extension and the concurrent DOT Route 6 and Main Street project, as well as an update from our Bike and Walkways Committee and their process. It's my intention to moderate a roundtable discussion where we can all get on the same page as to the timeline of the project, the public safety concerns that have been raised, and what measures have been taken to address those concerns. And I'd ask everyone participating in this discussion to be respectful and constructive. There are concerns that have been raised by the community and the select board, but it's my hope that this discussion will be an opportunity to respectfully discuss these issues. I'd like to begin by having a representative from the DCR present, then the DOT, then Bike and Walkways. And then after everyone has presented, we can enter into a semi-structured roundtable discussion, if that sounds good. So I guess that's Paul for DCR over here.
Great.
Do you want to screen share anything, or do you want to give an update?
Yeah, let me give an update. I don't have anything to screen share, but thank you very much for inviting us here and for the opportunity to be able to participate in this discussion. Let me just give a brief update on, I think as everybody knows, we are currently constructing what we call phase 1 of our Cape Cod Rail Trail extension project that goes from the LeCount Hollow trailhead, which is the current terminus of the Cape Cod Rail Trail, to the Wellfleet Hollow campground. That's under construction right now. And, you know, as a part of that project, we will be improving the LeCount Hollow trailhead, including a separated family-friendly path connection that allows users to travel through that property without interacting with vehicles in the parking lot, and then cross LeCount Hollow Road. We, at this time, are doing some demolition and grading and site prep and planting work at the property on Route 6, but we are not building any facilities there. We're not creating any parking or extending the trail to that or anything like that. We will be installing some fencing and some plantings where the former railroad corridor comes onto that parcel, and also where it crosses Old Kings Highway. So just wanted to sort of clarify about that. Looking forward, we do have what we call phase 2 of the Wellfleet extension project designed. That's the last mile. That's the mile that goes from the campground to Route 6. That project is on hold at this time. There's no active design or planning on that. It's not in our capital plan for next year or in our 5-year capital plan at this point. I think just a couple of comments about that. If that project, that phase 2, that last mile ever gets built, that will be the end of the Cape Cod Rail Trail. That'll be the end of the 25-mile Cape Cod Rail Trail that goes from Yarmouth to Wellfleet. There is no rail trail that goes beyond that. And I think that's an important point because, you know, rail trails are a special kind of bicycle and pedestrian facility. They are level, family-friendly, built on former railroad corridors. They don't go along roads or anything like that. They go through natural landscapes. And that, you know, I think the Cape Cod Rail Trail, the value of that has really proven itself to all the communities of the Cape. And so if that final mile ever gets built, that will be the end of it because there's no rail trail that goes beyond there. And I guess I would also say, you know, we come to this with an open mind, but at this point, we still do believe that building that phase 2, that final mile, will be an important amenity for the community. Our plan includes building a new trailhead terminus and parking lot that, you know, would be the end of the rail trail, as I mentioned. And, whether a route north goes from there or it goes along LeConte Hollow Road or Old Kings Highway or some other route, we still believe that that trailhead terminus parking lot and that, what might then be a spur connection will be a valuable asset and really the safest asset for the community. And I guess that's what I wanted to share this morning.
Okay.
And I guess I just, let me just make one more comment, and that is, whatever the route north is, DCR doesn't really have a horse in that race. We don't have any more property. We're not doing any more acquisition. We will, of course, collaborate and connect to whatever that is in the most appropriate and safest way, but we don't have a horse in that race.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Paul. So now we'll just go on to Mass DOT and get an status update from DOT.
Sure. Again, this is Greg Mischel, project manager from the DOT for this intersection project. I'm going to echo Paul's introduction there. We are thankful to be invited to this roundtable. I think it will promote communication between agencies and the town, and ultimately will result in better outcomes for the projects in the future. So we're really excited about this intersection project. I think it's much needed, and we think it will be beneficial to the community and result in a much safer intersection of Route 6 and Main Street. Before I get started, I wanted to just kind of provide an overview of where we've been and the schedule moving forward. So first off, I'd like to mention that there are actually two Mass DOT projects in Wellfleet right now. There's the intersection project of Route 6 and Main Street, and I think that's most people are familiar with that. There's actually another project that people may not be aware of. It's a pavement preservation project, basically a paving project of Route 6 from town line to town line through Wellfleet. And I think, we'd like to say a few words about that because it does, it's going to be coordinated with the intersection project at some point. So first off, just a little history. The town initiated the project mainly because of safety concerns. The intersection was identified as a high crash location and actually continues to be identified as an HSIP crash cluster. So, there was a need back when the project first started, and there continues to be a need there from a safety standpoint. The intersection was also noted to have outdated traffic signal system and a lack of pedestrian and bicycle facilities. So there was additional need for the project. The next steps in the project is that the project information, including existing conditions, traffic studies, environmental constraints, etc., and data justifying the need for the project are put together and submitted to Mass DOT Project Review Committee. So the acronym from that, and we have acronyms for everything. The acronym is PRC. The PRC reviews the data and the proposed scope of work for the project and approves the project to move forward. In this case, the project was reviewed by the PRC and approved to move forward in 2013. Sometime after that, as the project was being designed, the DRC Rail Trail project commenced. During the design development of the intersection project, due to the close vicinity of the trail and the intersection project, Mass DOT and DCR began conversations to ensure the projects were coordinated and complemented one another. the pavement preservation project, this other Mass DOT project, was initiated more recently in 2018. This project's primary focus is to address the condition of the pavement, but does include complete street elements per the Mass DOT Healthy Transportation Directive, and minor changes to address known concerns. So, it's mainly a pavement project, but all projects need to consider what we like to call complete streets, so that bicycle and pedestrian accommodations are considered as much as possible. Let's see. So in terms of the design and where we're at, all designs are broken up into several stages with milestones at the 25, 75, 100%, and also a final design stage. So those are milestones in the project design. Right now, the intersection project is at the 25% design stage, and the design was submitted by the design engineer, Stantec, in August of 2020. And that has gone through the full Mass DOT review at this point. The next step in the design process will be the 25% design public hearing. So the design public hearing is held to present the 25% design and solicit input from the community. It's a very important stage of the project design development. So right now we anticipate the design public hearing will be held in the near future. We're planning for it right now. And this is a chance for all parties to ask questions and provide comments on the project, on the design, which are then considered and move forward into the 75% design stage if they're appropriate. So again, to stress, all views and comments submitted in response to the hearing will be reviewed by MassDOT and considered to the maximum extent possible. So at this point, both the intersection project and the pavement preservation project are included in the Transportation Improvement Program. We call it TIP in the federal fiscal year 2023. And the federal fiscal year runs from October 1st to September 30th. So for fiscal year 2023, that will begin in October of 2022. The TIP is a federal aid program that provides federal and state funding for projects. And we anticipate the projects will likely be combined for advertising in the future. And that has several advantages. It will allow the projects to be better coordinated by one contractor. And because the work will be done at the same time, it will hopefully minimize traffic impacts to the public. So Stantec has been hired by the town to design the intersection project. Another company, Michael Baker, has been hired to design the pavement preservation project. Mass DOT oversees the design and construction of these projects. So the way it works is the design is developed by Stantec or Michael Baker, but that design must be reviewed and approved by MassDOT in accordance with Mass DOT policies and standards. And one of those standards is the Healthy Transportation Policy. So through that, MassDOT is striving to meet the goals of the Healthy Transportation Policy and upgrade pedestrian, bicycle, and transit accommodations to the extent feasible. Lastly, I'd just like to say that safety is always at the forefront in the development of designs for roadway projects, and we are working hard to produce a safe intersection design for motorists, pedestrians, and bicycles. So I've asked Jill McLaughlin of Stantec if she could give an overview of the intersection project. Again, Stantec was hired by the town as their design consultant. And I felt that she had the most, she had the design at her fingertips and can speak to it most appropriately. So I'll turn this over to Jill.
Okay. Hey, Jill,
Hi, good morning, everybody.
would you like to screen share anything, or do you want to just talk about it?
I could just talk about it. I'm just going to give a quick general overview.
Okay.
Yeah, let me jump in here real quick on that, because the design public hearing is coming up soon, and that's where the details of the project will be presented. And I at this point, I didn't feel that because the design public hearing is coming up so soon that we really didn't need to provide a lot of detail. So really, I think we're focusing on kind of a bigger view of the project so that everyone understands generally what's being provided without going through a lot of detail.
Okay. Go ahead, Jill.
Hi, thank you. So I'll start with the roadway design modifications. So currently Route 6 is a single lane in each direction until you approach the Main Street intersection. And at that point, it widens to 2 through lanes. And on the northbound movement, so Route 6 eastbound heading towards Provincetown, there's a left turn lane to Main Street. And the southbound direction, there's no left turn. So it's just the 2 through lanes. With our design, what we're going to do is modify the configuration of the intersection so that we're actually just continuing 1 through lane through the intersection, because a lot of the feedback that we had heard from the community during our earlier design coordination meetings was that 2-lane section becomes a raceway for vehicles trying to get around people that are likely driving the speed limit, and that has been a big safety concern from what we've heard from members of the town. So our design is going to eliminate that raceway effect. The other component that we're going to be adding to the intersection is we will provide a left turn lane from the Route 6 westbound/southbound movement, so that there will be a left turn lane into the pharmacy, which doesn't currently exist today. And based on our road safety audit, has really been part of the cause of that intersection being a high crash location. For bicycle and pedestrian accommodations, starting on Main Street, currently, as Greg had mentioned, there are no bicycle or pedestrian accommodations immediate to the intersection. So on Main Street, what we're going to be doing is adding a 5-foot shoulder that will be for bicyclists. And then on the north side of Main Street, we're going to be adding a 5-foot sidewalk for pedestrians. On Route 6, south of the Main Street intersection, we'll have a 5-foot sidewalk on the west side, so for the Route 6 westbound direction. And on the east side, we're going to have a 10-foot wide shared use path. We're also, actually, one thing I did forget to mention within the roadway too, one of the changes that we've made since our 25% design submission, again, based on feedback that we've been receiving from the community, comment letters that we received, we're also going to be adding buffered bike lanes. So on Route 6, we'll have 11-foot travel lanes, a 2-foot painted buffer, and then a 5-foot shoulder for bicycles. And then just kind of recapping again on the pedestrian accommodations, on the west side of Route 6, we'll have a 5-foot sidewalk up to the Main Street intersection. And on the east side of Route 6, we'll have a 10-foot wide shared use path that starts from the southern limit of work, which is where the Cape Cod Rail Trail terminus would be if that phase 2 picks up and continues north through the intersection to our northern limit of work. And that's kind of just a quick overview of what the design is today.
Okay, thank you. And then we'll go to bike and walkways. If you have a status update or a presentation for us, Peter, and you're welcome to screen share if you would like, or you can just speak.
Michael, could I jump in here real quick?
Yes.
I was going to have the project manager for the pavement project jump in with just a real quick overview. Unfortunately, Andrew couldn't make it this morning. but he gave me kind of a quick overview that I guess I can read it for you, if that's okay. Just so everyone's kind of understands what the pavement project is about. So the pavement project will consist of pavement resurfacing, mill and overlay mainly, and restriping for the roadway. Guardrail and catch basins will also be updated to meet the latest design guidance. Mass DOT, this is more of a kind of a statement, is striving to meet the goals of the healthy transportation policy. There it is again, and upgrade the pedestrian, bicycle, and transit accommodations to the extent feasible. The majority of the corridor is proposed to include buffered bicycle lanes with small sections of 5-foot wide painted bike lanes, installation of sidewalks at the Wellfleet Cinema, Marconi Beach Road, LeCounte Hollow Road, Cove Road, Main Street, and School Street. And it will include upgrades to bus stops. In addition, the shared use path that's part of the intersection project will be continued from the intersection on the eastbound side of Route 6 up to School Street. So that's a quick overview. And I was going to ask Maddie, the clerk, to give a little overview of some of our design standards, because I think, you know, there may be a little bit of a misconception that you know, any design change can be just made. In reality, you know, everything that we consider has to be considered with the design as a whole. You know, one change in one area might have negative impacts in other areas, but also there are certain design standards that need to be met, including, you know, ADA compliance, complete streets, and healthy transportation. So, Maddie, would you mind just giving us a quick overview of some of those standards that need to be met, particularly with regards to, you know, bicycle and pedestrian accommodations?
Sure, yeah. I mean, a lot of it has been said. We have a healthy transportation policy for a variety of different types of facilities, from a bicycle and pedestrian standpoint. Depending on the mapping that we have, that shows high potential for biking, high potential for walkable trips, and urban boundaries puts each MassDOT project or each, you know, project with MassDOT money into a category, which typically includes, you know, requires sidewalks on both sides of the street if you're in an urban boundary, that meets accessibility requirements, that meets the ADA guidelines. And from a bike perspective, thresholds of certain volumes and speeds will require a greater facility than just a bike lane. So that would mean that includes shared use paths, side paths, separated bike lanes, buffered bike lanes. And as kind of a complete streets reviewer, we look at all the nuances of the project, as well as the volumes, geometry, and speeds, and ensure that the project is meeting our healthy transportation policy to the maximum extent practical, as always. But I think that's about it, Greg.
Thanks, Maddie. Appreciate it. Thanks, Michael.
Yeah, thank you, Maddie. Okay, bike and walkways, Peter?
Yeah, thanks, Michael. Let's see, Rebecca, I had sent you some slides ahead of time. Rebecca Eldridge, I don't know if you're on.
Yep, hang on one
Yep.
second. Do you want me to screen share
Sure.
them for you?
So let me introduce myself. I'm Peter Cook. I'm the chair of the Wellfleet Bike and Walkways Committee. There are 5 members. Ned Oliver is also online here. And we'll be brief, but I want to introduce our work to you because we appreciate the inputs that we've received from various agencies. We've certainly been attempting to outreach with everyone who's on this call, and in addition, receiving inputs, much appreciated. As we conduct an analysis, our role is to advise the Town of Wellfleet Select Board. So that's an important distinction. We support them and we advise them. They do speak for the town. So let's see, let's go real quickly through this, Rebecca. I really wanted to, there's one in particular I wanted to address here, and we'll be brief. Next slide. So essentially why we're doing our report, we're building on, rather than trying to compete with, the master plan that was done previously in 2016 with an amendment in 2017 by the Cape Cod Commission, which had inputs from a number of agencies. The Outer Cape Master Plan indicated there was some additional work to do in Wellfleet, and we include a couple of quotes here. Bottom line is we're doing a study to address what was identified as a need for additional study. Next slide. Next slide. They'll talk about that. So vision statement and a mission statement for what we're doing so that you have this on the record, but basically to determine the best connecting route for bikers and pedestrians from the Cape Cod Rail Trail through Wellfleet to Truro. Again, the charge that we received from the Select Board, to whom we were reporting with this study, is to identify alternatives that could continue the spirit of the Cape Cod Rail Trail in some sort of bikeway extension through Wellfleet to Truro. Next slide. And as you can, anyone who was part of the authorship of that Outer Cape study can tell we shadowed many of the phrases and the language that were included in that study as we developed the mission statement on the previous slide. Our approach has been to, first of all, be very open and transparent in what we're doing, and to first and foremost engage the public in understanding the public's interests in Wellfleet, and then also to reach out to other agencies and also the different departments, boards, and committees of the town government, but DOT, DCR, Cape Cod Commission, and the National Seashore. And in polling those various groups, and in particular the citizens, this is a list we came up with of needs for a bikeway. We then took these needs and we packaged them as 5 overarching goals, which could be comprised by 18 objectives. And from those, we developed 60 scoring criteria so that we could conduct an actual quantitative and computational analysis of the various alternatives. Again, the attempt here is to be as factual as possible in considering the facts available. In addition, I'll say, to taking input from the public and from the stakeholder agencies, we also conducted a review of other studies that have been performed around the country, including a few over in Europe, actually. Next slide. Thank you. So we've been at this for 6 months. The first 4 months we spent preparing, and that was researching the various guidance documents that are applicable, both at the US level and also the state level. Again, looking at similar studies that have been performed in other locations, both in Massachusetts, on Cape Cod, in Massachusetts, and around the country, and a few conducted in some of the EU countries. Then also, again, engaging the various stakeholder agencies, taking public input. We've tried to frame our study based upon inputs that we receive from those various parties, and to do it in coordination with stakeholder agencies, and also use their prior work addressing this issue as guidance for our work. Our analysis, rather than being subjective or opinion-based, is intended to be completely objective. And you can see here guiding principles for our report to be rigorous, comprehensive, detailed, objective, and systematic. Next slide. And essentially our game plan here to identify alternative routes using inputs from a number of different stakeholders. You'll notice I included the Truro committee. If we're going to connect to Truro, we wanted to engage them early in this process, and they have had, we've been open and transparent with them as well, and we've had meetings with our Truro counterparts. And then you'll notice a red line here, methodology development firewalled from the identification of alternatives. That was done on purpose. We had two separate efforts that were being run independently and without insight to each other, so that we could, by studying resources available around the country, develop an analysis methodology that would be truly objective and not opinion-based in the local area. So identifying alternatives on the one hand, developing an analysis plan on the other, they came together. We presented this to the select board beginning of April. They approved our analysis plan, our approach, and we are in the process of conducting that analysis now. Again, guided by inputs we received from stakeholder agencies, using their inputs, in particular technical inputs, and now undergoing that analysis so that we can provide a report to the select board. Next slide. Next, that's just part of a description of what we're doing. The 5 goals we ultimately developed: safety, practicality, user experience, conservancy, and connectivity. Next. And we're analyzing the various alternatives that have been proposed to us. The key for that, by the way, is that we have not discounted any alternatives, whereas it is possible to do so before focusing on ones that we consider to be the most feasible. But the decision was made, and in fact requested by the select board, to include all of the alternatives that the public proposed, so that there would be a once and for all apples to apples comparison of all the alternatives, so that the scoring of the alternatives could speak for themselves. And an important point here also is that we're investigating the complete context for the opportunities and obstacles as we look to move forward with bikeway alternatives, by not discounting any of those proposed routes. We're really getting a balanced picture of the landscape that we have to consider and making a decision on what is ultimately a pretty complicated decision. And it's going to require, obviously, good partnership with all the agencies here. So thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Okay, so is there anyone else, any other agency that has anything to present, or should we commence the discussion? I think that's probably it for presentation. Okay, so I guess we'll try and loosely structure this to go through and have a discussion on each presentation or each project, starting with the DCR project, questions, concerns. Everything should be please directed through the chair by raising your hand. Brian Karlstrom has his hand up now. Go ahead, Brian.
Hi, Michael. Yeah, before we jump into it, I just want to add a little bit of perspective from where the seashore is at. You know, we really appreciate all the work that's being done and looking at improving overall public safety. But I just want to remind everybody, in terms of the seashore's role relative to this, we're listening in to see where we might be able to help and contribute. But I also want to remind everybody, we were one of the partners that helped put together the Outer Cape Bike Pedestrian Master Plan with Cape Cod Commission, Wellfleet, Truro, Provincetown. We were an integral portion of that. And we've done a lot of work relative to the recommendations of that in terms of putting things into place, specifically the share the road projects in Wellfleet, at Marconi, and on various site roads, rehab of the Head of the Meadow Bike Trail, and a new 0.8 of a mile connector from Head of the Meadow up to Coast Guard Road with some alternatives to asphalt materials that are holding up really well. It's a product called Organic Lock. And also, we're still working on completing some segments that needed attention at Beach Forest and Herring Cove. And we expect that to be going forward next year through a design build contract that's impending. And we have commented on all the MassDOT and DCR plans in Wellfleet. We're currently working and just had meetings with Peter and his team last week. But I just want to remind everyone, you know, that the seashore is really focused at this point in time on maintaining the assets that we have. And all the work that we've done thus far relative to bike paths is just that. You know, I think this will be a fascinating conversation, but I just want to be really clear from the start. We're not interested in developing wholly new bike paths within the seashore. We're trying to overcome a legacy restoration effort in excess of $40 million. We're working really hard to do that. That's what we're focused on. We're really not intent, nor would we have any hope of creating wholly new assets that we would be required to manage. Again, I think this is tremendous. We're having this community conversation with a broader perspective. Happy to be a part of that. I just want to make that really clear as we begin the conversation from the seashore's perspective. So back to you, Michael. Thank you so much.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Brian. Okay, so I think it's probably a good idea to kind of go through and have any questions and concerns raised about the DCR project first. They were the first to present, then we'll go to the DOT. Those projects are linked in some way as to how they're designed based on, you know, the previous plan for the terminus or the current plan for the terminus. And so there may be some overlap there, but anyone who'd like to speak or address a member, please do it through the chair by raising your hand. And I'd gladly go to the first person who would like to speak on the issue. And just a reminder, please be respectful and constructive in this conversation. And this conversation will not include comments from the public. This is just a roundtable discussion with those of us who are here. I would potentially allow input from our police if they wanted to weigh in on safety issues. But other than that, it's this roundtable. So anything from the select board, I guess? Ryan Curley?
Yeah, so the I guess they're calling it the shared use path now. It makes sense if the DCR rail trail extension ends at the terminus that they proposed to have it on that side of the road. But if there's a different terminus, then it would make sense to have the shared use path on the other side of the road than it is currently in terms of the Route 6 and Main Street. And then I have a few questions on the Route 6 design. The first is
DOT, Ryan?
what?
Is this for DOT?
Yeah, this is for DOT.
Okay, we'll just jump back and forth here because I think that they're linked. So.
Yep. What, I didn't ask this earlier, but what's happening with the telephone poles on the MassDOT portion?
Yep, I can answer that.
Yeah, I was going to ask Jill because I know she's intimately involved with the design moving forward, and particularly she probably has more knowledge of the utilities than I do at this point.
Yep. So typically, if they're impacted by the project, they'll just get moved to the back of sidewalk or shared use path.
Okay. So it looks like there's some that would be impacted. You know, I would say the preference would be to actually bury the utility lines rather than having telephone poles if possible. And then there is the at the intersection with Main Street, there's currently no divider separating north and westbound traffic. And in the select board meeting, where we were presented with the plans, I don't know how long ago, but I think we were pretty clear that there needed to be a divider between the north and westbound traffic lanes into Route 6, or at the Main Street Route 6 intersection, because yeah, I mean, the amount of traffic there, they just need a physical separation between the different traffic lanes. So, and then I'll be quiet for a little bit, but
Okay.
so.
Is there anyone who wants to respond to that, or should we just?
Yeah, I could I guess just kind of make a note generally about the divider that's out there today. And the reason why there is a divider out there today is because it protects the left turning traffic from Main Street. So if it wasn't there, then what would happen is the southbound / westbound traffic would align with that left turn pocket. And so what that island does is it just pushes the traffic over and creates that buffer for them. So because now we're adding a left turn lane into the pharmacy, that left turn lane becomes the protection for the traffic turning left onto Main Street. So from a geometric standpoint, we wouldn't need it because the configuration itself creates that protection.
Anyone else from the board have any comment on, I guess, either DOT or Helen?
Yes, can you hear me all right?
Yep.
Okay. First of all, we welcome your presence here. Thank you very much. And we also, I'm sure, or at least I welcome your response to the need to repave Route 6. It's just been getting worse every year. So that's good. Thank you. I have a question for whoever can answer it best. In response to the proposal to continue this very wide, in quotes, shared use with sidewalks, if I understand, change on the east side of Route 6 all the way to School Street, had the review committee or group considered that what already exists, which is a situation where there's a regular wide breakdown lane, lots of sharrows, a grass area that's still within the state layout, onto which bicyclists or pedestrians can easily swerve or move over to. That's the first part of that question. The second part is, do you understand that almost nobody walks there, and that spending taxpayer money on something which will then have to be repaired is perhaps something you should think about? That's my first question. And my second question is it true that these sidewalks, which definitely need to be considered because it's part of what generally is needed for safety for pedestrians in, for example, urban areas, although living in New York City for years, lots of cars went on the sidewalk, never mind. But sidewalks aren't always the safest thing for pedestrians in terms of the step up and step down. And the fact that sidewalks often, as they, age, become uneven in a way that a breakdown lane with sharrows on it never does, in my experience, having walked and biked here for my whole life. So I'd appreciate answers to those questions for whoever can answer them. Thank you.
I would probably be Jill, I guess.
Sure.
Jill, would you mind taking a stab at that? I'm just asking you to jump in if you could. And then we, maybe Pam or Maddie could kind of address why we have sidewalks in the first place, and maybe why, what was it? I'm sorry, Helen, what you called it instead of the sidewalk, what were you suggesting? I'm sorry.
What already exists there and which is very usable. And one of the things that can happen, not often, but sometimes, is that a bicyclist needs to swerve away from the road. And the safest way for that to happen is to have there be a flat continuous surface onto whatever the grass is, even when there's a guardrail a bit beyond it. And to have that be a transition that a bicyclist can make in an emergency. Otherwise, the continuity of the breakdown lane and the sharrowed marked breakdown lanes is really a very good way for through traffic on bicycles. Pedestrians tend to walk against the traffic, as we know. And once again, I live on Route 6. I've been doing this my whole life. And I have seriously considered, with great openness, all the things that the DOT has come to us, the proposals that you've come to us with. And I really think that in much of this area, a sidewalk, particularly one with a right angle curbstone, is not safer. In fact, it might be more dangerous. It would be more dangerous for bicyclists. Thank you.
Is there a question?
So that was the first question, Greg.
All right, I'm not sure what the question actually is. Should there be a sidewalk? Is that the question?
No, what I asked was this considered when you were reviewing, for example, a stretch going from the pharmacy north to School Street?
Okay, so the question is whether the need for a sidewalk was reviewed in that area versus just leaving it alone?
Yes.
Okay, okay, that's the question.
Okay. Yep. So,
Jill?
Sure. I can start with that. I guess a couple of things kind of revolving around Helen's questions. So first, it is Mass DOT policy to consider bicycle and pedestrian accommodations for every project. So that is something that is required regardless, unless it's actually state highway or a no access layout, which Route 6 is not. So along Route 6, for a majority of the corridor where we do have the sidewalk or the shared use path, it is separated from the roadway with by about 5 feet. And so because of that, we are able to provide either a berm or sloped granite. It does not need to be that straight vertical curb. So it will allow for what you're asking, Helen, and in that it would allow, if a bicyclist needs to be able to ride up and get off the road if they need to. Another thing that we are doing with our project is we are creating more space for bicyclists if they are in the road. So on Route 6, we would have that 2-foot striped buffer and then a 5-foot bike lane for bicyclists. So they're going to be further away from the traffic to provide, I guess, a more safer environment. And if there is a car or something that somebody needs to swerve out of the way of, there's a bigger area for the bicyclists to be further away from those vehicles. On the Main Street portion of the project, because the right-of-way is so tight and we don't want to impact the businesses, we do not have that buffer. So along Main Street, the sidewalk is right up against the roadway on the north side. And because the sidewalk is up against the road, we are required to have that vertical granite curb. But along Main Street, we are also providing a 5-foot shoulder for bicyclists that gives them, again, a little bit more area to ride in and a little bit more separation from the vehicles.
Okay, Justina has her hand up. All right, Justina. You're muted, Justina. You're still muted.
Sorry about that. I'm not sure I heard Helen right that she said that almost no one uses the lane, but I want to point out that we really do have a population of non-recreational bike riders. We have a lot of guest workers in the summer, particularly for our restaurants, who don't have the means to have a car. If they use a bike, it's a wobbly old bike. They use the bus. They are seen walking with groceries and bags, sometimes late at night. And they're almost an invisible population. I worry about their safety on the side of the road. So I just want to speak up for a population that aren't recreational bike riders and who don't have cars and who use Route 6 and who walk along and who use the bus and who get off and have to walk where they're going. So I just want to say that I think that enhancing Route 6 serves a disenfranchised population that aren't our voters and who come here in the summer to work. And sometimes they're late at night, so just going to speak up and say that. So I think for this population, enhanced safety on the roadway is a good thing.
Okay. Can everybody hear me all right?
Mhm.
It's not too loud. Okay. So I guess I will just make a couple comments, have a couple questions about, I guess, both projects and how they sort of link together, because I know that the DOT has sort of engineered the project's been engineered by DOT to sort of accommodate the terminus from the DCR. That's their plan. And I think, first I'd like to make the point that it's extremely important that we have adequate bike and pedestrian travel along Route 6 in that corridor and throughout the town, where people are current users of that area and are basically unprotected right now. And that I think that the real point of contention and the real safety concern really at the heart of this is the terminus of a recreational trail, which is used by commuters and other people as well, but essentially heavily used by recreational cyclists, terminating at a location that's a very heavily used, dangerous section of Route 6, and where there's a very obvious incentive to continue from one bike trail, which is the rail trail, to the shared use or bike paths, basically increasing usership of bicyclists and recreational cyclists and families across all those curb cuts. And so that's always been my concern. It's not necessarily the DOT project or the extension of the rail trail, but the convergence of those two situations where we have potentially 1,000 cyclists a day coming through Wellfleet on the rail trail, and at the end of LeCount Hollow Road, there really is no incentive to enter the highway and bike to a gas station, right? So you don't have that issue. At LeCount Hollow Road, your incentive is to go down to Ocean View Drive. I mean, that's where you would naturally continue. When you come out on Route 6 at the old Amsler property, there's a high incentive to go to PJ's, Cumberland Farms, try to get to the center of Wellfleet. And that's all fine and good with current users of that highway right now, right? Because they're already using it. The concern for me is really the intersection of having recreational cyclists that may have biked for 10 miles or something like that, who want to get an ice cream cone or want to get to the pier or the harbor and go to Max. And to do that, you kind of have to cross a gauntlet of exiting entrances and egresses into an extremely busy gas station, a boat yard that has pretty large vehicles with trailered boats. PJ's has, I think, 3 entrances and four in that spot, basically, because you have Cahoon Hollow. It's a lot of cross traffic. And so where my concern really is, if the DOT is basically designing the shared use pathway, where we have a shared use pathway, which is people traveling in both directions, up and down by bike or by foot, plus alongside that, a sort of bike lane, that you have 15 feet of potential people for oncoming traffic and entrancing and egressing into those extremely busy businesses and parking lots. And that, to me, is standing there at PJ's on a summer day seems treacherous. You know, I think that the idea of converging those two things is where there's the point of contention. And I think everyone that's involved in good faith in this and that has been really paying attention is that I've talked to is supportive of a bike trail extension and also in increasing the safety for pedestrians and bicyclists on Route 6, but not with the potential for inviting more cyclists and recreational users into that Route 6 corridor right there, along with that really strong incentive to continue down the highway, with possibly a false sense of security that you're exiting a bike trail and then entering onto a shared use path that may be laid out with all good intentions, but with increased usership that I think is kind of untenable with the amount of ingoing and outgoing traffic. And so that's basically my overall overarching point that I continue to make and have made throughout this process that I don't think has really been addressed by the terminus at the end of that spot. And one solution to me is that the terminus be similar to the LeCount Hollow terminus, because there is enough land there out at Old Kings Highway or Old County Road, and there is no sense that there's another bike trail or multi-use path where you're entering into sort of a false sense of security, right? You come out, there's a terminus, and then you're on a road, you know? That's much different than having a terminus where there is a shared use path and a bike trail, which connects basically directly to that and that incentive to travel. And so I'll just lay that out there and put it out into the public and to this group that really is the heart of where there's contention is the merging of those two situations. And I don't know that there's a way around it. But I don't think signage necessarily addresses the incentives. And I don't know if anybody would like to respond to that, or if they feel like there's been measures taken that would sort of diffuse those concerns, those public safety concerns from either agency about those issues. So.
Michael, can I say something?
Yes. Well, I'd just like to hear if Greg or Jill, I mean, there must have been some conversation about this. It's been come up in public meetings. So I just want to know if there's been any sort of discussion about this and is there an idea that this is not really a concern, or is not a real safety concern, or if there's a way that this has been addressed in the planning. So that's basically my question to either DOT or Stantec or DCR. I guess mostly DOT because they're kind of accommodating, but also the DCR, which has been involved in the planning process.
So I think in terms of the shared use path, right now we're looking at a concrete path. And I guess the idea is that would continue across the driveways and provide a visual cue for motorists to realize that there is something going on there, that there is a path there. And in terms of having both a buffered bike lane on the roadway as well as a shared use path, the shared use path would provide a way for people that aren't so experienced, families, to go to PJs if they want to, on a safer sidewalk than on Route 6. I mean, you know, just speaking for myself, I'm an avid cyclist, and I don't use the rail trails. They're just not safe for me to ride on. You know, there's too many people, too many conflicts. So I would, you know, as a cyclist, I would prefer to ride on Route 6. You know, so that provides the person who is traveling because they need to get someplace to work, whatever, or they're you know, and a bicycle enthusiast to have a place to ride that's safe for them. Jill, do you want to jump in here at all? I mean, I know you had many discussions with Complete Streets about these the shared use path and how we got to where it is. I don't know if you can add to that.
Yeah, no, I think you summarized it well. I think our design of the shared use path has evolved over our different coordination meetings. So originally we were designing it as a true shared use path, but then revised the design to make it more clear to motorists that bicyclists and pedestrians within that area have priority. So typically with a standard shared use path, you just have like the asphalt surface, but we've revised it to concrete surface for the entire length and continue that concrete surface through the driveways to really increase the visibility of it and to alert motorists that there are going to be people there, there are going to be bicyclists there, and that they have to be mindful of them.
Paul?
Yeah, thanks. If I could just make a couple of comments. So, I mean, first of all, I guess, Michael, I want to affirm what you just said. And, you know, I think we share all those concerns that you expressed. And I think what we're trying to do is what's the best way to address all of those concerns. One of the points I guess I want to make is, and I think you alluded to this, there is a difference between the rail trail and who uses the rail trail and how people use the rail trail, and what happens when the rail trail ends, and who will use the accommodations that go further from there. Our experience is that many users, particularly families, particularly with children, they only use the rail trail. When they get to Lookout Hollow, they turn around, or that's where they've parked. When, you know, down in Dennis, when they get to 134, they're not going any further, or, you know, and now at Station Road in Yarmouth, same thing. That's not to diminish what you said about the fact that there are users who want to go further than the rail trail. And I think you are absolutely right that in this particular situation, there are people, including families, who are going to want to make that next step to go get the ice cream or to go to Cumbies or whatever. But I do think there are, in the designs and you know, with the terminus, I mean, what we try to do is there are enough visual cues to tell everybody, okay, your experience on the rail trail is over here. If you're going further, this is something different, and you need to act differently the way you do that. Again, that doesn't diminish the concerns that you just said. I think those are real concerns. The two flip sides of that is, one, there absolutely need to be bicycle and pedestrian accommodations on Route 6. There's just no question that right now, the current condition on Route 6 is the least safe for those users. And I guess I'm afraid that if we ended the rail trail at something like Old Kings Highway, that would also be a real safety concern. You know, now you have families who are coming there and they really don't know what else to do, especially if there's no parking, no terminus, because there isn't the space to do that at Old Kings Highway. At that particular point, we'd also be coming downhill slightly, so that creates an additional concern for those users. And there's, you know, that road has some blind corners. So that really bothers me, that particular one, just, you know, as personally as a rail trail, you know, project managers. But again, I don't want to diminish what you said. I think these are real problems. I think these are real concerns. I think this is why we're having this discussion here.
Yeah, I mean, part of my concern, just one last thing and then I'll move on, is the speed in which people take left-hand turns across traffic into those egresses and to get ahead of oncoming traffic. I mean, it's definitely concerning to have people moving in both directions across those egresses if they're going to be in higher numbers than are our current users, because you see people step on it to get into the parking lot at Cumberland Farms to get across oncoming traffic. And it's usually fairly high speed. So for them to do that and then have to slam their brakes on into incoming traffic poses this other issue. And I don't think that's the case in most of Route 6 in Wellfleet. I mean, it's really just this particular area. And it's definitely a complicated problem. I don't know that there's a great solution other than if there were some way to have subsequent or alternative paths that connect to the rail trail and go north outside. And that's something that, Bike and Walkways is working on right now. Yeah, I'll leave it at that and go to Ryan's had his hand up first.
Could I just interrupt for a minute? Maddie DeClerc from DOT got kicked out. Can Rebecca or whomever is the host let her back in? Thank you.
You got that, Rebecca? Okay, Ryan, and then Helen.
Yeah, so I largely echo what Mike said. I've actually said all those things in previous meetings. But I'm just trying to discuss what's in front of us right now. And one of my concerns is still having the bikes on the same roadway as vehicles. And I don't, especially on if there is a shared use path on the west side of Route 6, or the side with all the businesses, I really don't understand why you would include a on-road bike lane as well. It seems like you're providing two of the same thing, and just increasing the amount of complexity in that area. I know that there are requirements for shoulders for roadways, but it would really increase the safety factor if the bike lanes were taken off of the same roadway as Route 6 and moved into basically the sidewalks, because that would provide a separation between traffic and bicyclists. And I know typically for Massachusetts design standards, they recommend having the bike lanes physically separated from the traffic. And that's a much safer configuration for everybody concerned. And I'm wondering if there's any way that we can accomplish something like that, so that we at the very least remove the bicyclists from sharing the road with vehicles. So this is probably to DOT or Jill.
Yeah. Did Maddie get on? I don't think so.
She's joining right now.
She's joining right now. Okay, maybe, I mean, Maddie is the person who would be looking at the accommodations, bicycle and pedestrian accommodations, and I think she could probably address that question more appropriately.
Okay, so I'll just have to repeat it once she's on.
Yeah, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
I am on now.
Hi, Maddie. So welcome back. We did have a question from Ryan regarding bicycle accommodations, and why we have both a buffered bike lane on Route 6 as well as the shared use path. So I'm hoping you can help us understand what the what the standards are here that we're following for the design. And Ryan, if you wouldn't mind maybe
Yeah,
repeating your question.
So the current design includes a shared use path, and then buffered bike lanes on each side of the Route 6, and then a sidewalk on the I would say that what cardinal direction is it? The east side? I don't know. Anyways, so it includes those features. I don't really understand why the bicyclists are on the same roadway as cars. Typically, it's recommended to remove them from the roadway wherever possible, so that they're into a protected bike lane. Especially on the one where we have a shared use path and a bike lane, it just would make a whole lot more sense to remove the bicyclists from the roadway and just have them use the shared use path. It's like one or the other. And then I am also wondering about the bicyclists on the other side of the highway, if they couldn't be moved into the sidewalk and off the road surface, so that they're not sharing the same roadway with vehicles, which is far more dangerous than having them separated. So thank you.
Sure. I'm trying to answer the two different parts. And I'm sorry, I'm on my phone just to make sure that my computer doesn't crash on me again. But in general, when we review plans from kind of like a headquarters, complete streets standpoint, we have one viewpoint that we review the healthy transportation policy. So some of these nuanced questions are really important to get public feedback on. For example, I've reviewed projects where I've thought either or, but I've thought maybe a shared use path or a buffered bike lane made more sense. And then the community came back with their own feedback regarding what would make sense in their community. And that's kind of the conversation. What I can speak to, I can speak to that this project in particular is in the urban boundary. So the sidewalk on both sides of the roadway are part of our requirements. Separating bikes from the road, I agree, is safer. Any physical barrier separation from our standpoint is a safer option. Of course, the comment about moving bikes off onto the sidewalk level, that would require a widening of that sidewalk to 10 feet. So just, we look at cross sections all the time. It's very nuanced. It's such a tough balance to strike between ensuring that the proper protection and meeting our standards is, we meet our standards, and then understanding all of the impacts of these different cross sections. So it's a long-winded word to say, honestly, I'm not necessarily the best person to answer that question, except that the project requires some sort of separated facility for bikes and sidewalks on both sides of the roadway from a healthy transportation perspective.
Yeah, I mean, we have a 6-foot bike lane, and then on one side of the road, is it 5 or 6 foot sidewalk? I mean, that's 12 feet. That's more than enough room to accommodate a 10-foot wide lane. On the other side, we have this 12-foot shared use path and a bike lane. It really doesn't make sense that we have that. Why not at the very least remove those bicyclists and put them solely on the shared use path? It really doesn't make sense to have additional lanes. And it would vastly increase the safety factor if they were moved off of the roadway entirely. And it looks like there's enough room to do that. And I don't know why it hasn't been done that way. So thank you.
So Jill, can I ask you to maybe jump in here? Because I know you're looking directly at the design, whereas Maddie is more policy and standards. You know, I guess I would note that the pavement preservation project will restripe and there will be bike lanes coming up Route 6. So you'll have to deal with those bike lanes in some fashion, right, Jill? And then, you know, you might be able to give us your perspective on right of way and what we can fit in the right of way at this point.
Sure. Yeah. So as Greg had mentioned, with the pavement preservation project, we're going to have bike lanes with a buffer within the roadway approaching our project limits. So we want to continue that section through because, like Greg had mentioned again earlier, was that we still expect more experienced bicyclists will be in the roadway. And so we want to try to still keep it safe for them. So that's why we have added that 2-foot buffer in addition to providing that 10-foot shared use path. The other thing is earlier, or I guess mid 2020, when we had submitted our 25% design submission, we included with that coordination letters that we had sent out to the different agencies within the community. And from the responses that we got back with those coordination letters, we did hear a lot of people asking for some kind of buffer within the roadway for Route 6 as well. So there were a few different comment letters. I don't unfortunately remember from off the top of my head who those comments were come from, but there were a few different sources of people asking for some kind of buffer for bicyclists along Route 6. If we were to change the design, and Ryan, I'm not sure if you were asking for a 10-foot shared use path on both sides or just why the buffer, but the 5-foot shoulder that we're providing, and it was 6 feet with our 25% design submission, but with adding the buffer, we reduced that a foot to try to minimize how much we were widening the overall roadway cross section. But if we were to provide a shared use path, we still need that 5-foot shoulder, because what that 5-foot shoulder does is it allows an opportunity for vehicles to pull over. If there are emergency vehicles coming through, it gives them an area to pull over if their car breaks down or if there's an accident. So it also helps with roadway drainage. If there's a heavy storm, we need to provide an area for collecting stormwater runoff so that we're limiting how much ponding gets into the travel lane, which could also be a safety issue for vehicles traveling through. So there's more function to that shoulder than just the bicycle accommodations.
I mean, just because we have on-road bike lanes on the other sections of the Route 6 doesn't mean that they can't be diverted off the roadway through this section, which is extremely busy. You know, and that doesn't really answer my question about also about the side that we have the shared use as well as the on-road bike lane. I mean, they really should just be, you know, one or the other, you know, because now you're going to have 2 lanes of bicyclists for these people to cross along with the pedestrians. You know, it really doesn't make sense as designed right now. So thank you.
Helen?
Yes, a couple of things. I'm not sure that the letters that have been received, possibly by Stantec or one of the 2 agencies, have included the many letters that the select board has gotten. And in my 22 years, I have never seen this much mail on anything. And almost all of them are well-reasoned, articulate particularly at this point, well-informed letters saying, please don't make this intersection more dangerous than it is. And it will continue to be. It will always be a difficult intersection. I just want to ask for a quick yes or no answer. Do I understand shared use to mean bicycles? In other words, a breakdown lane. Is shared use lane a part of the road that is shared by cars and bicycles, or cars and or bicycles and pedestrians?
No.
No, it's a separate facility. It's a sidewalk that's separated by a grass strip right now, I believe. Right, Jill? It's not on the road.
But shared by who? Pedestrians and bicyclists?
It's wide enough that it could be used for both pedestrians and bicycles, yes.
Okay, I need to address that then. It is much more dangerous for a pedestrian to be sharing a way with bicyclists. They come up behind you. I have had numerous people in my life hit by bicycles because you can't hear them coming up behind you. And this happens on the bike paths, you know, pretty often. People are walking their dogs or something, and somebody comes whispering by on their bike and they forget to ring a bell or say, watch out, or they do it at the last minute. So let's say this was created. I would never walk on something like that because of what I just said. The second thing is having a continuous bike breakdown lane on the side, as we do all along Route 6, except in a few places, and this is one of them, open for people who want to just keep going through, particularly through those many curb cuts, I think is essential. And by the way, it's been brought up and asked for at every meeting I've been to, whenever this kind of wide, extra, should we say, expanse has been proposed. Again and again, people have said, don't do that. Second thing I want to say is, I agree with Justina. People that are using it to get to work and because they don't have cars really need to be thought about. I was simply saying, why have a sidewalk from the pharmacy going north to School Street? Just that expanse. The third thing is, I agree with Mike about where the controversy is. And that's what most of the letters from people have been about, is why are these two things being done like this? So I'm very glad to hear that the DCR has hit the pause button. And most of all, I'm glad to feel that you're all listening. Thank you.
I guess I just have one more question. I know Peter Cook has a question too, but just on this same subject very quickly. I guess the question is to the DOT, if there were no terminus for the rail trail, would the design be anywhere similar to what it is? Is this designed to accommodate pedestrians coming off of the rail trail? Or would this design exist no matter what? And that's the question. Is this designed to accept increased use due to the rail trail, or would this be how you designed it regardless if there were no rail trail terminus?
Michael, can I respond to Helen's comment briefly?
Yes.
As you know, from a safety perspective, there is no data showing that bikes and pedestrians sharing space is this unsafe condition as compared to vehicular bikes sharing space. I think it's super critical to, from a safety perspective, to have that thought out on the table. As a bicyclist commuter myself, that's just, vehicles are moving faster, heavier, extremely dangerous to any pedestrian or bike as compared to bikes and pedestrian sharing space.
What about Michael's question? You know, and maybe Jill, I know you've been involved from the beginning here. In the absence of the parking lot for the rail trail, would we have the 10-foot shared path?
Yes, it would still be required. The treatment, I think the only thing we changed as a result of our coordination meetings was the surface treatment for that shared use path. So typically they're just an asphalt surface, but to increase the visibility, we changed it to the concrete surface and run it through the driveways.
Right. But through that section, we would have sidewalk on both sides of the roadway,
Yes.
correct? And we would have the bike lanes, correct? And then because of the, you know, there are different levels of bike accommodation, correct? I mean, you know, initially, I think we just had a single wide line with the shoulder. We added the buffer, which is a striped, 2-foot striped warning, right? Because of the design speed of the roadway. Is that correct?
Yes, so the latest policy directives, so Route 6 is defined as a corridor that has a high probability for biking. And because of that, we're required to provide separate facilities, or if we can't, then we would need to have some kind of buffer within the roadway.
Okay, and that buffer provides that separation between
What is
automobile traffic and the bike.
what is the buffer there? It's like a rail, a guardrail?
No, it's just paint.
No,
Paint on
it's paint. Yep.
Okay. I'm gonna go to, Peter's had his hand up, and I'll go to Peter first. I'll come back to you, Ryan. I just want to make sure you hasn't spoken, gets a chance to speak. Go ahead, Peter.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. So in our capacity advising the select board, the public comes to us to provide its inputs. We've received a lot. I want to emphasize that one constant input we get is that the Wellfleet public wants to improve safety along Route 6. Just to make sure that's clear, it's not that we're saying no bike improvements, no bikeway or pedestrian improvements along Route 6. The question is what makes the most sense in terms of, you know, following established safety guidelines, but also to meet the requirements of the community, not necessarily only the state guidance. So, you know, in looking forward to how to best do that, Michael, is it okay if I do a share screen? And the reason is because some members of the public are actually a bit organized in their concern about this, and I can show something really quickly.
Yes, as long as it's brief, I'll allow
It's
that.
very brief.
Yep.
Only if I can get it to come up. The
shared screen's on, Rebecca?
Yes.
yes, let me try to pull this up. And if it cooperates, we'll see it. And if not, we'll just describe. But basically the concern is that the, I'm not going to be able to pull it up. It doesn't look like. Here we go. Can you see that?
Yes.
Yes.
This is the section of Route 6 that's proposed for the shared use path along with the bike lanes. The concern that the public keeps expressing to us is all these curb cuts for PJs, for Cumberlands, for Cahoon Hollow Road there, where you have the roadway intersection. And that in the summer, this is summertime traffic, bike lanes alongside the road combined with the 10-foot wide shared use pathway separated from the road, that shared use path is still going to cross all those curb cuts. And as you can see, people are trying to come in and out of those curb cuts. And during the summer, there's already limited visibility. So the public's concern is how to, is about that shared use pathway, is all those curb cuts. That granted, it will separate cyclists and pedestrians from motor traffic, except where those curb cuts occur, and there are so many of them. Just wanted to point that out.
Right.
Because
Understood.
input received.
Yeah.
But
Right.
there's count of
Understood.
curb Cuts in that, it's about a half-mile section, and I had done a count, I think there's about 14 curb cuts or something in that half mile that are heavily utilized down to Siemens Bank. Steve Oliver has had his hand up for a while. Go ahead. I think you're muted.
Yeah, it's actually Ned. But yes, sorry. But yeah, the real
Bike and walkways.
yes, I'm with the bike and walkways. Sorry. Yeah,
Okay, go
yeah.
ahead. Sorry.
The main crux of this whole problem is that area, the curb cuts, the shared route with two-way bicycle traffic there is adds to the lethality of all those curb cuts, those intersections. I'm with you, Greg. I'm an avid cyclist. If there was a one-way lane on each side of the highway, I think you could deal with it pretty well. But if you've got bikes and pedestrians coming from both directions, and as Mike pointed out earlier, there's people are trying to make left-hand turns into PJs, into Cumberland Farms. They're accelerating fast. They're trying to get through. The traffic is crazy there in the summer. And if you have two lanes of that's two-way bike traffic that they have to cross as well, when you're taking a left-hand turn, you're not expecting something coming from that left side. You're not going to be seeing it. Is just absolutely the crux of the problem. And that's what I mean, if nothing else, if you had single bike lanes, one on each side, it isn't great, but it's better than what we have, and it would be doable. But by throwing that shared sidewalk with two ways of traffic, bike traffic and pedestrian traffic, it just will, it's going to be so dangerous. That's my main point. Yeah.
Okay, well, we've heard that loud and clear. The design process is ongoing. Like I said, we're only at 25%. The design public hearing is coming up, and that's where I encourage people to provide written comments, and all written comments will be considered to the maximum extent possible. And, you know, like I said, you know, it's a big jigsaw puzzle, right, Jill? We you know, one change can have kind of a domino effect, and so it's and that's why we hire the Stantec's of the world, because that's what they're good at. So, but we also have to consider complete streets to the maximum extent possible. So we hear the comments. I encourage people to attend the public hearing when it comes out. At this point, it's coming soon, and there will be a public notice. We'll advertise in the newspapers, and it should be obvious when it's going to happen. And again, I'm not sure if I mentioned this, but it will be a combination of both the intersection project and the pavement project. So they will be combined into one public hearing, and you can provide comments on both, or just one if you want. But we're listening, and it's something that you know, we'll bring back and discuss with Jill.
If I could just add to that, Greg mentioned the written comments. We will also be accepting verbal comments. It will be a live public hearing. You know, this past year with the pandemic, it's been a learning curve for everybody, including Mass DOT. And we have been evolving into live, either virtual, it'll likely be a live virtual public hearing, depending on where we are with the governor's direction and, you know, CDC and whatnot, the different requirements that we have. And we do also encourage the community to post this on your website and help us advertise, because we do want comments. That does help the project evolve into the best project that we can create. Thank you.
Michael, if I may,
Who's that?
Bob Weinstein.
Okay, Bob.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you all for being here. I feel like the lost set of keys. No one mentions the MPO. I'm beginning to wonder why I serve on it. Listening to members of the DOT who have not mentioned the multiple bureaucracies in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, the Metropolitan Planning Organization, which works with the Cape Cod Commission, is responsible for the allocation of all state and federal funding for our infrastructure. That includes the roadways, public transportation. Anyway, I have a question that I would like to take this conversation back to where it began with Paul from the DCR. If I understood him correctly, he said at the outset that there were two phases to the completion of the Cape Cod Rail Trail. Phase 1, which is currently under construction, will have a terminus at, if I heard him correctly, Payne's Campground. There was no future funding and no anticipation, as I understood, for phase 2. So my question is, did I hear him correctly? And then I want to know what agency's equipment did the devastation on the east side of Route 6 and did excavation for what looks like a parking lot? That's my first question.
Paul?
Great. So let me, I think there's two questions here. Yes, so our phase 1 project, which is currently under construction, ends at the old Payne's Campground, what is now DCR's Wellfleet Hollow Campground. That's where the path ends. It's, in my opinion, it's not a great terminus because there's no parking. The only people who really, you know, either have to turn around there or you're camping at Wellfleet Hollow. No doubt there will be people who ride through Wellfleet Hollow and then access Old Kings Highway, but that's our phase 1. Relative to funding for phase 2, what I said is it's phase 2 has been designed. You know, we've had several meetings on it. I think you've all seen the plans, and that's really what we're discussing now is when and if that might ever get built. And then I did comment that it is not in our DCR's capital plan for construction this coming fiscal year, which starts in a couple of weeks, and it's not currently on the major trail 5-year capital spending plan. That doesn't mean that if it gets put on the table, it couldn't get back into one of our spending plans, but
You're not answering my question. My question is, what funding allowed the serious excavation and vegetation removal on the east side of the highway, which I drive by every day?
Right.
What is that for?
Sorry, that was the second half of your question, and I believe you're referring to the Amsler parcel.
Yes.
The current work that's going on there is a part of our phase 1 construction project. We have used that parcel for staging and construction office. As a part of phase 1, we did demolish the buildings that were there, and as a part of that, you know, removed septic and grading, and we'll be doing grading, site stabilization of the back slope, and replanting of vegetation along the buffers. But we're not building, as I said, we're not building the parking lot there.
Not yet, correct?
That building the parking, I see Peter shaking his head. Thank you, Peter. I think the parking lot, if it's built, will be a part of phase 2.
Thank you. My next observation is I would like to thank Pete Cook for including the video. It seems like we should have a social overview of this problem, which is increased population. To date myself, I've lived here long enough to have seen the completion of Route 6 highway from North Truro into Provincetown. I remember when it was a gravel roadbed. I also watched the completion of the 4-lane portion of State Highway Route 6. And what people don't seem to acknowledge is the increased pressure and the population uptick. In my lifetime, when I was in high school in the 1960s, the population of this country was 165 million. Now it's 330 million. And Cape Cod has become a destination location, ill-equipped to handle the vehicular traffic, to say nothing of the bicycle and pedestrian traffic. And to encourage more bicycle use on Route 6, the state highway, which is a heavily traveled roadway year-round and now approaches gridlock in many times of the year, seems highly irresponsible on the part of DOT to include a painted bike lane with chevrons in the road and a bicycle image painted on the roadway in what was a breakdown lane for vehicles. If that's going to be continue to be used, I would point out that in the area under consideration in Wellfleet, it was the site of more than one fatality in the recent past. How many fatalities will it take to make bureaucrats wake up to the fact that it may not be a good idea to encourage recreational bicycling on a busy state highway? I can tell you that from School Street on, as you approach the Truro-Wellfleet boundary, there is no easy way to move the bike lane as it exists painted off the highway. The topography would make any construction enormously expensive. And getting back to the consideration of the improvements at West Main and Route 6, I've been involved as a member of the MPO since its inception. I advocated for that going fast forward. I think the conversations may have started as early as 2018 or 2019. And every year it kept getting bumped forward. Now it's in the TIP program for 2023. And I'm wondering how the engineering firm is dealing with the fact that as you are at that intersection, and I'm not unconfident of my cardinal points, on the east side of the roadway, you have a cemetery that was laid out before the state highway layout. On the west side of the highway, you have wetlands. And I want to know how those factors figure into any design improvements in that area. And without maps in front of us, and I'm sure at a public hearing upcoming, they will be available for the public. So the public is not confused by cardinal points, direction, which sides of the highway are being talked about. And again, the images of Pete Cook's video are things that I think everybody should pay attention to. And maybe now's the time, and I don't want to be the rat in the room, but I am not an advocate for encouraging more bicycling until there is a way to safely accommodate vehicles on the state highway. Thank you for hearing me out.
Thank you, Bob. So we're coming up on 2 hours. I've got 2 more board members that would like to speak. So if it's new, then let's hear it. If we're rehashing what we've already talked about, I'd like to move on. So Ryan first.
Yep. So this is to you, Jill. You said that the shared use path was required. I understand that, you know, a sidewalk and a bike lane is required, but can you elaborate why shared, in addition to a sidewalk and a bike lane, that a shared use path is also required?
So the separated bike facilities are a requirement because the corridor within our project area is listed as an area that has a high probability of biking.
But I mean, that still doesn't explain why there's also a shared use path in addition to the bike lanes. You know, if, and the current one is it 11 or 12 feet wide as proposed?
The shared use path is 10 feet and the buffered bike lane within the roadway is a 2-foot painted buffer with a 5-foot shoulder.
So if the shared use path was reduced to a normal sidewalk, there's, with that additional space, there's enough space to separate out the bike lanes entirely from traffic. With you know, a what would be 4 feet buffer between the bike lane and the vehicle traffic on the roadway. To me, that's a safer situation, because you're reducing the number of cross traffic, and you're providing, and you have enough room to actually provide a physical barrier between the roadway or the road surface and bicyclists. I'm wondering why that wasn't considered.
I'm wondering if it would be easier if I bring up a typical section of what we have, or I think we have renderings that were developed for our March of 2020 meeting. So why don't I bring
Ryan, just to be clear, are you saying instead of having the bike lane in the shoulder, that we create a separate bike facility that's off the roadway? Is that what you're asking?
Yes, it could be off the roadway or separated by a physical, some sort of physical barrier, like the pylons or something, separating the bikes from the roads. And there is enough room if the shared use path is reduced
To a 5-foot sidewalk.
yeah,
say.
to
Well,
sidewalk.
Jill, what's your feeling on pylons? I guess you're talking about.
I mean, I don't know if pylons is the right thing, but
you're right. Bollards, is that you know, like the steel poles that are concrete filled, something like that? Is that what you're talking about?
I don't
Or
know.
something more flexible, more movable, something. Just to be clear on what you're thinking.
Well, flexible, or you know, I'm not sure what the best method is to provide a physical separation. I know that, like, if you drive around Boston, for instance, there are a number of bike lanes that are separated by like the pylons, similar to what's on Route 6, where further up Cape, where it's, you know, one lane in each direction, with a, you know, separated, a raised pavement separated area with pylons on top of it. That seems to be a much safer treatment than having a shared use path, and then also, you know, a shared use path, a sidewalk, and on road bike lane. So,
Jill, do you know what Ryan's talking about? Is that up near Truro, Provincetown?
no,
that
it's well, Truro Provincetown is actually not up Cape.
Oh, sorry.
Cape Cod, everything's reversed. So it's like the section between Orleans and Dennis.
Oh, okay. Okay.
There's like a raised pavement pathway, or raised pavement between each of the lanes, and then a, you know, pylons along the extent of it.
Is that on Route 6?
Yes, that's on Route 6.
Okay.
And that's a common treatment in Boston as well, when dealing with bikeway or bike lanes adjacent to roadways.
So I think correct me if I'm wrong, but the section that you're talking about on Route 6, that's just opposing the opposite lanes of travel, correct?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean,
So, yeah.
yeah,
And so, you know, I might need to turn this over to somebody else from Mass DOT, but I would think that the difficulty with the bollards would just be maintenance, snow removal, but also if we'd have to look into whether or not it's restricting site distances and kind of making it difficult for vehicles that are coming in and out of those driveways to see more clearly what's happening within the roadway.
I mean,
Jill, everything that you said is exactly right. We would have to look at maintenance, snow removal, site distance, different resources. The section that you're talking about, Ryan, is, I believe, from just beyond exit 9 on the Mid Cape, and that was where it used to be a 3-lane section heading toward Orleans, like Dennis through Orleans.
yeah.
And that is a separation for the 2-lane vehicular traffic.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, it's just what I can describe it as, because I'm not sure what the specific term is, but it is very common in the city to use a similar separation between a road surface and a bike lane. You see them all over Boston. But the the Complete Streets also recommends having the bike lanes physically separated. And honestly, if you reduce it to a sidewalk and a bike lane that vehicles are having to cross, I mean, that's easier for them to cross than a 11 or 10-foot shared use path with pedestrians and bicyclists, and then also a bike lane with bicyclists. You're talking about they have to cross 15 feet to get to the road and to make their turn, which is, I mean, it's, I don't know, it just seems like it would be a lot safer if we did away with the shared use pathway entirely and just separated the bike lanes from traffic. And I don't know why that has not been considered. So thank you.
Michael, may I ask a quick question?
Hold on, I've got people have had their hands up for a while. I'm gonna make sure I get to everyone here. I was hoping to wrap this up within around 2 hours because there's a lot of people on from other agencies. So if people can just be quickly and get to the point, and maybe we can leave stuff that's subject to public comment to the DOT for those for the public hearing that's coming right up, as far as those types of detailed suggestions. Helen, and then Justina. Helen, you're muted.
Sorry. 2 questions to the DCR and the DOT. Yes or no? We have gotten the select board has gotten a lot of mail about this. And it's directed to us, but it's directed to your project. And can we forward that to you in terms of public comment? So these people who have taken the time to write these emails don't have to do it again. Would that be acceptable? Yes or no?
Let me speak for DCR. We're not currently in a public process for our project right now, although I'd be happy to have you send any information, and we can review that and keep it in.
Thank you. It would count. It would count.
Yep.
Thank you. And DOT?
I think it's a similar response. I constantly respond to comments or questions that are submitted by email. So absolutely, I think it'd be nice if people could respond and we could get everything together in one place during the design public hearing. But if you want to send those along, I think it's something that we could certainly respond to.
And second question, the public DOT hearing is going to still be on June 30th. Is that correct?
So that was the intended date. There are a number of things that we have to do to get that ready. And right now we're struggling with one of them. And I had hoped to get to the select board before this meeting to let you know that it may not happen on June 30th. So I'll keep you informed and let you know when we think it would be.
Thank you.
But it's soon. It's soon.
Thank you.
Justina?
Yes, to piggyback on what Helen said, our community is a thoughtful community and is terribly concerned about safety on Route 6. And I must say, I was startled to hear the response to Ryan Curley's suggestion of pylons of snow removal. Members of our community have died on Route 6. And I think every effort must be taken so more people don't die, more bicyclists don't die on Route 6. I was disappointed at the response to Ryan's sensible suggestion that pylons are in Boston. I think our community deserves pylons. Snow removal is certainly important, but I would like to see pylons investigated, and if not used, to get a better response than snow removal. Thank you.
I apologize if that was abrupt. That certainly wasn't intended to say we absolutely will not do this due to snow removal. If that's the way it came across, I am sorry, that wasn't intended. We do have a number of concerns, including maintenance. I'm not saying that pylons are off the table. That's something that we can discuss further and maybe even partner with the town. I apologize if the response was abrupt. That wasn't the
No, it wasn't abrupt. It's just our community is concerned because we've had deaths on that highway. Thank you.
As are we.
Yeah.
Okay, I have Stephen Tupper here who hasn't spoken yet. I'm going to go to him first. Cape Cod Commission. Go ahead, Stephen.
Thank you very much. I'll make this very brief, but I just thought it was important to note a couple of items. First, I just want to note I'm here both as Cape Cod Commission staff and also staff to the Cape Cod Metropolitan Planning Organization. I've been in listening mode so far because that's really the point of these projects, is really about the community discussions around the details. So going back to the Outer Cape Bicycle Pedestrian Master Plan, that was certainly an important effort between the National Park Service and the towns of Wellfleet, Truro, and Provincetown. But really where we are now is looking at the design details. So I appreciate the very thoughtful comments. Some of these things are things we have heard since the Outer Cape study about the challenges of this specific segment. So certainly look forward to the detailed discussion at the design public hearing as we really go over some of the real detailed elements. I did want to certainly acknowledge the riders that are out there today. So I was glad to hear about the riders and pedestrians that are out there on Route 6. That's been a focus of all the studies. And certainly a lot of the fatalities we've seen recently are those type of riders that are out there for transportation that may not have options. So I just want to make sure to continue, as was discussed today, to not lose sight of that. And also not lose sight of the fact that some of these decisions about the final details are tough. If it was easy, it'd be done already. But also want to understand that think about the alternatives. So if we don't provide a solution in one location, people are going to seek out a way to get to their destination. And in some of these, in some of the situations here, there'll be options that are less safe. So certainly you're not going to get perfect solutions, but think about some of the alternatives and whether or not you want to be encouraging people to take other routes that really aren't as safe. And then finally, I know it's a tough discussion to think about some of the changes here. But I think some of these will be positives in terms of identifying this area as a place where you may see pedestrians and cyclists that are out there. So some of the things are tough to envision today, but certainly look forward to some of the visualizations we'll see at the design public hearing and continued engagement. And then just to finally close, I do want to acknowledge the important role of the Cape Cod Metropolitan Planning Organization. And to be clear, they're the ones that make the decisions on funding related to federal highway and federal transit funding. So they have a kind of thumbs up or thumbs down role in a lot of these projects. So represented here, member from the MPO, glad to see that. But again, MPO members also follow a lot of this local dialogue. So we'll continue to follow along, listen to the local conversation, as that is an important part of the design of all these projects. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Stephen. And I think Peter Cook was the last one who had his hand up.
Oh, well, yes, briefly, thank you for the opportunity to participate. I had a couple of quick questions for DOT with your project planning, and I realized that 25% review. Sounds like it's a very preliminary stage, but we all pretty much understand that 25% means the project's moving forward. I mean, the way it works. But a question is, in preparation for the 25% plan, if there was an evaluation matrix prepared for the project. I know the project scope has ballooned quite a bit since it began years ago as a intersection project. It now includes a substantial length of Route 6. If there was my committee would appreciate a chance to review it. If there was an evaluation matrix done of the various design types, since that's part of the DOT planning, project planning process. And just an aside, I mean, there are a number of specifics that go into design. I mean, that's why there are design professionals, and we salute that and we appreciate it. And it oftentimes involves judgment. As we've reviewed through a lot of the guidance documents that exist in the country here for projects like this, a quick note, we saw in the American Association of State and Highway Transportation Organizations, there's a bit of discussion about separated pathways next to highways. And the idea that it's separated is good, but there were a number of cautions. It was very cautionary about those types of paths. And we thought, well, it is separated in the case of Wellfleet. It's being designed that way. However, with the number of curb cuts, not just the number, but the density of curb cuts, that really a lot of those safety concerns that led to those precautions in that guidance by that professional organization may apply. And just as a recommendation, it might be worth reviewing those with the idea that the separated pathway is going to cross so many busy curb cuts. Thank you.
Okay, and with that, I think, Stephen, your hand's still up. Do you intend that to be? No? Okay, I didn't think so. So with that, I would say that concludes our roundtable discussion, unless anyone on this panel has anything additional to add. I'd like to thank everyone for coming to this meeting that made it, even if just in a listening capacity. It's good to have everyone in the same room at the same time, the same virtual room. And, you know, I don't know that we'll have this again because the state is currently lifting these Zoom situations, and physical presence is a lot more difficult to attain from these cross-agency situations. So we were fortunate that this was scheduled on June 14th, because as of tomorrow, I believe all meetings must be in person unless you have a remote participation policy. So we're fortunate that we scheduled it today, and appreciate all the conversation and dialogue and back and forth, and we'll look forward to the public hearings and seeing what types of changes come out of these discussions, and hopefully lead to a safer situation for the town of Wellfleet than we're currently in, and as safe as possible as we can make it. That's my hope, and I think everyone involved in this conversation's hope, so including those agencies designing this project. All right, so it is 12:08, and I guess I'd like a motion to adjourn.
I so move, Helen.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Okay, and a roll call vote?
Justina, aye.
Brian, aye.
Michael, aye.
Helen, I.
Okay, and I don't know if Janet's on here anymore, or was on here. So motion carries 4-0 to adjourn. Thank you all, and let's continue this discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.